Liberal Democratic Party received an extremely harsh verdict from the public. We must take this seriously and reflect on it from the bottom of our hearts and be reborn.
The long-time governing party of Japan loses its majority but vows to remain in power. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu and this is The Heat. They have been in power almost continuously since the end of World War II, but now Japan's ruling coalition has suffered a stunning defeat in a snap general election. The Liberal Democratic Party and its partner Komeito lost 64 seats and their majority in the lower house. Despite the result, the recently appointed Prime Minister says he will keep his job. We begin with this report from Terence Terashima in Tokyo.
It was an overwhelming defeat of Japan's ruling coalition, an outcome the Liberal Democratic Party never imagined. Now it brings into question Shigeru Ishiba's leadership within the LDP.
The result is pretty much what I expected, but I was concerned the voter turnout would be quite low. Politically, apathy seems to be very strong in Japan.
Japanese voters had hoped the country would come out of its deflation spiral after former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe released its 3 arrows aimed at the economic recovery. However, the public feels that the LDP's economic policies have not exactly hit the mark, and that people continue to suffer from rising cost of living and stagnant wages. Earlier, the LDP was also exposed for its involvement in a political funding scandal.
I don't think the criticism was all about the money scandal. People look at the economy and see how frail it is. They promise a minimum wage of 1,500 yen per hour. I don't think it can be achieved by the LDP alone. It's about time they cooperate with the opposition to move things through.
Experts say the election defeat has placed Ishiba in a tough spot. With dwindling trust across the party and lack of public confidence, Ishiba will have to make concessions with opposition parties to realize his policies.
The LDP will now have to look into cooperation outside their cabinet or align with opposition parties, making it difficult for them to operate. There are 3 parties that can cover the lost seats to maintain the majority: Japan Innovation, the Democratic Party for the People, and the Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan. So I think it's important that we watch how they develop a relationship with these 3 parties.
However, Ishiba faces yet another crucial task to be able to continue his premiership. He must be nominated as Prime Minister again. A special diet session is set to be held for a fresh vote by both upper and lower houses to select a new Prime Minister. If Ishiba is elected, he will form a second cabinet. If the diet selects a new Prime Minister, Ishiba's tenure will be the shortest since the Second World War. Terence Terashima, CGTN, Tokyo.
To continue our discussion, let's bring in our panel. From Kyoto, Takesato Watanabe is a professor at the Department of Media Studies at Doshisha University. From New York, Amy Catalinac is an assistant professor at the Department of Politics at New York University. Sourabh Gupta is a senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-America Studies. He joins us right here in Washington, D.C. And from Beijing, Einar Tangen is a senior fellow at the Taihe Institute and chairman of Asia Narratives. Welcome to all of you. Takesato Watanabe, let me start with you. The Prime Minister Ishiba, he was elected on October 1st, and he called the snap election in an effort to shore up support for his government. He was in office for just a short while. Well, it didn't turn out the way he had hoped. How did the Prime Minister misread the public mood so badly?
There are 2 reasons, namely, for that. The first one is Mr. Ishiba was believed to be very honest, and what he has said and what he said and what he has to say. But actually, Mr. Ishiba, when he became the Prime Minister, he could not do anything. He spoke slowly, he did anything slowly. And more than 50% of his political promises were not realized. So the people of Japan, they were disappointed with Prime Minister Ishiba. So this kind of disappointment is happening throughout Japan, throughout all the generations. So this is very miserable. I myself believe that Mr. Ishiba is a bit more able person, but his surroundings also not so good. This is a very miserable political world of Japan.
Takesato, you say he was unable to fulfill his election promises, but he was only in office a very short while, wasn't he?
Yes, but his office term is very short, but he said so many things this time before the election. Also, he has been a very strong person in the party, leading the factions. So if he can do that in himself, he should do that. But for the eyes of the people, he seems to be the person who can say so many things these days, but who cannot realize those things. So this discrepancy made this kind of miserable, atmosphere in the politics of Japan.
Sourabh, Ishiba will now have to govern in a coalition with other parties, including the opposition as well. The LDP has a few days to put together that coalition. How do you see this turn out? What are his options?
I think his options are two parties which are both opposition parties, but in terms of their ideology are fairly conservative in their approaches. One is the Japan Innovation Party. It is an out-and-out conservative party, a nationalist party. It's a region-based party. This is not likely to be the coalition partner. I think they got either probably 28 or 38 seats. I think it was 38 seats, but they will probably not be the coalition partner. Will not be the supporting partner. The supporting partner, in my view, would be something called the Democratic Party for the People. This is an offshoot of what used to be the Democratic Party. So you would think this is a center-left party, but it is effectively, I would say, a centrist or even a slightly center-right party, which on issues like energy security, on the economy, on defense and security policy is not very different from where the LDP is. That having been said, no party wants to taint itself by being too close. No opposition party wants to taint itself by being too close to the LDP. So they will support the LDP probably from the outside and allow it to govern as a minority government. And the reason they don't want to support is because, what has happened is the first shoe has dropped, and next year is an important upper house election, and that's when the second shoe might drop. And no opposition party, even one which might support from the outside, wants to be tainted going into that upper house election. So this is how it will be, I think, a minority government supported by a nominally center-left party, which is actually a center-right party, but which will try to be a puppeteer. And so there is going to be uncertainty in Japanese politics for the next 12 months or so.
Okay, let's go to New York to Amy. Amy, great to have you with us. Welcome to the show. Now, Prime Minister Ishiba, of course, as he pointed out in his address to the nation, he said that this is a time for reflection, a period of reflection for the party. He places the blame for this defeat on the financial scandal involving members of his party. Let's listen to some of what he had to say.
I am keenly aware that the biggest factor was the failure to report on political funds, and the suspicion, mistrust, and anger of the people had not been erased over the issue of money and politics.
So, Amy, the accusations were that members of the party had misappropriated funds, that there were also kickbacks, they did not report some political donations. So the scandal may have contributed in some significant way to his downfall, to the defeat, but what are the other factors that could have contributed to this defeat?
Yeah, I guess I'm someone who thinks that the scandal had a lot to do with it, actually. But I think that the scandal was sort of quite a big one, and it was rolled out. The sort of media was uncovering more and more sort of information about just how much money was involved and just what happened over the last year, and that led to declining support for the previous Prime Minister, and then he tried to sort of do various things to punish those involved and enact legislation, but that didn't go well. So I think the scandal, it was a sort of big factor in this election. But I think that the opposition, the Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, was able to connect people's sort of unhappiness about the scandal to their pocketbook issues related to the performance of the economy. So they were able to sort of say, like, voters in Japan, like, they're struggling with the cost of living increases, their wages are not keeping up with cost of living. And the leader of the Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan was sort of like, he was very skilled at saying, politicians are pocketing all of this money, they're not paying any taxes on this money, these sums are exorbitant, but so they're not focusing on the cost of living struggles that you are having in your daily life. So I think that the economy played a role in this election, but it was really the scandal that gave that issue legs, so to speak. So I guess I'm someone who sees the scandal as being a really big driver in this result that the Prime Minister is facing.
All right, Naomi, very briefly, what are your thoughts and your views on what kind of coalition might emerge from this?
Yeah, so I think there are sort of only two coalition partners. Okay, so first of all, there may not be a coalition. So, the Komeito and the LDP together, they only have 46% of seats. They need to get over that 50% of seats threshold. They also need, for a stable majority in the Japanese lower house, we actually need 261 seats. They only have 215 right now. So they need sort of a coalition partner. But it's possible that they can convince some of the independent winners to join their fold. They're also going to welcome back those previous LDP politicians who did not run under the party label. They're going to welcome them back. There's going to be a few more seats they're going to need to get over the 50%. So I think it's possible that they're going to choose they're going to sort of embark on talks, well, they're already talking to the Democratic Party for the People. They have 28 seats, and so if they add them, then that will put them over the threshold. Another party is the Japan Innovation Party. But I guess I think that we may not see a formal coalition emerging. We may see the party trying to sort of pick apart people from other parties and try and form a majority that way, or we may see more informal coalition arrangements. One reason we might not see a formal coalition arrangement between, I think, say, the Democratic Party for the People and the LDP and the Komeito is that's very difficult to work out, because you have to work out who's going to run in all of these single-seat districts in the next election.
Right. And
the LDP and Komeito, they already have individuals in all these places, or virtually all of them. And to bring another party on board is challenging.
Einar Tangen, the Chinese Premier Li Qiang, he met with the Prime Minister Ishiba on the sidelines of the recent ASEAN meeting that was held in Laos. They agreed, the two countries, China and Japan, they agreed to expand cooperation on things like science, technology, the digital economy, as well as green development as well. So how will China be viewing this latest turn of political events in Japan?
Well, it's an internal matter, first off, but they'll be very interested whether there's going to be follow-through. Given that there's quite a bit of consternation about the economic situation, which actually has improved. The latest figures that came out just today put income at above inflation for the first time in quite some time. But that wasn't good enough to help in this election. But you also had he was talking about having an Asian NATO. It was quite unusual, even upsetting people in Washington. So at this point, it's just a wait and see. There's very little chance that there'll be any effective coalition, and this will probably hurt the LDP going into next year's upper house elections. Even if they get the 6 former LDP independents to come with them, they would still be 12 short. We've talked about, which parties they could come together with. But even if the 4 opposition parties came together, they would be 11 short. So you have a situation where there won't, he will be, well, whoever the LDP nominates will probably be the prime minister, able to form a cabinet, but not necessarily able to do much in terms of legislation.
Takesato, you know, as we pointed out in our introduction, the LDP has been in power almost continuously since the end of World War II, and they have been able to contain deepening public anger, disquiet over things like stagnant wages, labor shortages, and concerns over an aging population. That's up to now. So what are the chances of a new government addressing these concerns, these challenges?
Japanese people are very obedient to the authority. If the authority has a real authority and real power, Japanese people are very pleased to follow him or follow her. Our country is a group guiding country, I dare say. So no one person can change or can work, can move the society, including the political world. So in this circumstances, Japan should do independently without the help of other countries like United States, like China. But now Japan does not have partners, both you see, in the West and in the East, I mean, including China and India. So the people now came to know those things after the election. After, you see, we had a serious economic dilemma. And nobody here in Japan cannot foresee what will happen next decade. So whenever I talk with my friend in the university and also in the area, in my living place, they say, you see, we don't believe in political affairs. We don't believe in the leaders of economic development. So you see, this is very serious and difficult time for Japanese ordinary people to look in the direction that we are going to. I myself, you see, is asked by students and also by political leaders. I'm put into difficulty too because the people now, they don't believe in any person, any political figures, including economic figures. This is a very serious problem for Japanese living, you see, these days.
Amy, Takesato brings up an important point there on you know, the interest in Japan among adults for politics. There was a survey done recently by Pew Research which showed that 56% of Japanese adults do not have any close affinity for any political party, and 1/3 say they are not satisfied with Japanese democracy. How do you explain those numbers?
Yeah, well, apathy is a problem, I think, in many industrialized democracies, especially among young people. In this election, turnout was really low. It was sort of, the third lowest turnout than in any lower house election in Japan in the post-war period. So that sort of apathy is reflected in low turnout, but even with this very low turnout, so low turnout, like traditionally, so the last time that the LDP lost, the only time it's ever not been the largest party was in 2009. And in that election, turnout increased by, it was 69%, now it's only 53%. So there is sort of association with turnout increasing and many people who don't usually go to the polls turning out and voting for the opposition party. But what's interesting about this election is that there was political apathy, turnout was relatively low, and yet there was still such a decisive blow to the ruling coalition. So it's interesting. So I think even in this world in which you can have reduced interest in going and voting and in elections per se, change can still be realized. So that for me was an interesting point about this election.
Sourabh, getting back to how Japan is seen in the world, how it is its place internationally, we look at the relationship with the United States. Japan is one of the closest U.S. allies. In fact, they are treaty allies. Do you expect any significant changes in that relationship? How will Washington be viewing this?
No, I don't expect any significant changes. In fact, I think Washington itself is going into an election, which is also could turn out to be very disruptive. That having been said, Washington is going to give space to the next Japanese government to find its footing. They were, Prime Minister Kishida, the previous prime minister, who turned out to be very, very unpopular, but was very popular, frankly, in Washington, because he made important strides on US-Japan defense-related issues in terms of reorganization of command and control, in terms of having counter-attack capabilities, in terms of ramping up the defense budget significantly. And so long as the conservatives run government in Japan, which seems to be likely the case, and especially if Ishiba comes in office, who is a defensive nationalist by orientation, I don't think Washington will have much of will get into issues out there and give the conservative government time to get its footing in place. So that's how I see matters going forward in terms of U.S.-Japan relations in the near term.
Right, Einar Tangen, on these issues of foreign defense policies, I mean, whatever the composition of the new coalition, Ishiba wants to retain some earlier policies that he has talked about, like restoring relations with South Korea and increasing Japan's defense budget. Let's listen to a bit of what he said about that.
The key for national security is the self-defense force. I will continuously work on the drastic reinforcement of this country's defense capability, including a new plan for the self-defense forces.
So how will that be seen in Beijing? I mean, will there be concerns that Japan may be remilitarizing?
Well, Japan is remilitarizing. It's not going to. Quite frankly, there is a concern. His talk about an Asian NATO. It was a little bit confusing all the way around. And as I said, I disagree with Sourabh on this, that I think Washington is concerned. And the reason is because we're all waiting here breathlessly for the results of the U.S. election. And quite frankly, Donald Trump has said that Japan stole the chip industry from the U.S., and that he was going to get it back or something like this. So there's going to be increased tensions. I don't think the Japanese public is, given the kind of economic news that they have, the IMF has just downgraded them from 0.4% growth this year to 0.3% growth. So these are not good economic times to be saying that it's time to put more money into bombs and bullets.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that he'll be able to get that passed. Maybe he can with some of the more conservative coalition partners, but I don't think it'll be very popular, especially going into the upper house elections in 12 months.
Takesato, one other big challenge for Japan, that's demographics. Japan has the highest percentage of people 65 and over globally. That's almost 30% of the population. The median age is 49, and for the 15th year in a row, the population has declined. How serious are these demographic challenges, and how do they impact the economy of the country and its growth?
This is a very serious problem, and all the sections of the government are talking on those matters, and they are showing some models. If the government shows correct and rosy future, which is supported by the reality, and real is a wish of the people, and if the co-reliance, co-dependency are born in their way of thinking in the daily life, another, light, another direction will be found in the very near future. So Japanese intellectuals, some of them, they are saying that we should not go hand in hand with the United States or the UK or even in China. Japanese, you see, intellectuals, some of them, of course, they say that Japan should go and should find another new direction for the future of the world. Japan has been hit completely by the United States or the armies of the world 50, 70 years ago.
Right.
So this is so complicated. No, you see, easy way. However, Japanese people are very, you see, educated.
Yeah.
And they know what to do when they find the light in the future by themselves. So I'm not disappointed.
Right.
However, our, you see, political leaders, they don't think that like that. They think that the next election is more important than anything else.
Yeah.
So the discrepancy of the thinking way between the two, ordinary working people and political leaders, some economic leaders too.
Right.
This is the most serious problem of Japanese people are facing now.
Okay, Amy, I've just got a little bit of time left. I want to look ahead to one of the big challenges that faces Ishiba, and that is he will have to rid the party of those accused of mismanagement, political mismanagement, and corruption. I mean, is he going to be able to clean house and hold the party together?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure what the answer is, actually. I think at this point, he's going to try and just form a majority sort of any way he can. I'm not sure what he's going to do about the people who, because going into the election, he said okay, so he won't have to he won't have to, people who lost the election, I think he probably will, and who were involved in the scandal, he will probably just say, okay, you're no longer, he may prevent them from becoming party members again in the future, and then that way he would have dealt with it, because I think about half the people involved in the scandal did not win seats in this election.
Right.
But if you did win a seat, so he went into the election saying that if you are involved in a scandal and you win your seat, then that is evidence that your supporters, have forgiven you, and that is evidence that they want you to be their representative, so will accept you into the party. So I think by default, some of those involved in the scandal will now have lost their seats and they won't be readmitted into the party without him having to take a direct action to that effect.
Okay, that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. And that is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.